Tokyo Bay, $10 billion. That is what it costs to lay a road across water that was never meant to carry one. Modern engineering makes this look simple. Pick two shores. Drive the piles deep enough, and you can bridge almost any stretch of water on the planet. Tokyo Bay said no, and what the engineers built to get around that no became one of the most expensive pieces of road ever poured. For years after it opened, almost nobody could afford to drive on it. Here's why. Look at a map of the bay. On one side, Kawasaki, on the other, Kisarazu. Close enough to see across on a clear day, but to drive between them, you went the long way around the whole bay. 60, 70 miles of it. Hours in traffic for a gap you could almost throw a stone across. Close that gap with a straight line over the water, and the drive drops to 15 minutes. That 15 minutes was worth billions to the people planning it. So they went after it. The idea was older than the money. Planners had been sketching a crossing here since the mid-1960s, back when Japan was pouring concrete faster than any nation on Earth. But the version that finally got built was approved in the late 1980s, at the exact peak of the bubble economy, when Japanese land was the most expensive on the planet, and every forecast assumed the boom would never end. Hold on to that detail. It matters more than any piece of steel in this story. The bridge was designed by engineers. The arithmetic was designed by the bubble. And that's where the bay started fighting back. You cannot just build a 14-kilometer bridge across Tokyo Bay. It is one of the busiest shipping lanes in Japan. Tankers and container ships move through it around the clock, and a wall of bridge piers would choke that traffic dead. So a full bridge was out. The answer they landed on was stranger than a bridge. They built half of it in the air, and then they buried the other half. For the first stretch off the Chiba shore, it's a bridge, roughly 4 kilometers of it, riding low over the water. Then, out in the middle of the bay, the road does something no ordinary highway does. It dives. It drops into an artificial island built from nothing but sea and fill. And from there it runs underground for nearly 10 kilometers of tunnel, bored straight through the seabed. That island has a name. Umihotaru, the ocean firefly. It sits alone out in open water, the one place where the bridge meets the tunnel, where daylight ends and the dark begins. To dig the tunnel, they built some of the largest boring machines the world had ever seen. 8 of them, with cutting faces over 14 meters across, the height of a 4-story building, chewing through ground that was less rock than soaked sponge. And because boring from the 2 shores alone would take too long, they raised a second man-made island in the open bay for one purpose: to launch machines from the middle, digging outward in both directions at once. Machines that started miles apart, under the sea, in the dark, and had to find each other with almost no room for error. They did. Today, twin ventilation towers stand on that construction island, shaped to catch the wind and push fresh air down into a tunnel that would otherwise choke on its own exhaust. Then, in January of 1995, halfway through construction, the Kobe earthquake tore through a modern Japanese city and killed more than 6,000 people. Every engineer on the bay understood the message. Their tunnel ran through exactly the kind of soft, waterlogged ground that can turn to liquid when the earth moves. So the tube was built to bend, flexible joints between the rings, a structure designed to flex through the next earthquake instead of standing rigid against it. Out under the bay, stiffness is what kills you. Even so, every meter was a gamble against the water overhead. One flaw in the seal, one weak joint, and the sea comes in. It did not. If the scale of this is getting under your skin, subscribe. We take apart a new colossus every week. Now, the number, all of it, The bridge, the islands, the tunnel, the towers came to around 1.5 trillion yen. Call it $10 billion and change, in one of the most punishing places on Earth to spend it. This is a bay ringed by fault lines, in a country that plans every large structure around the earthquake it knows is coming. It sits under the path of typhoons that roll in off the Pacific every year. And under all of it, salt water, working at the steel and the concrete every hour of every day, forever. A structure like this is never finished. It is only maintained. The bill for keeping it standing never stops arriving. But the danger the sea poses was not the part that nearly broke it. The part that nearly broke it was the toll booth. To pay back $10 billion, they had to charge for the crossing, and the toll they set was brutal. Around 4,000 yen for an ordinary car, call it $40 each way. The forecasts promised more than 30,000 vehicles a day would pay it. When the road opened in December of 1997, the real number came in at barely 10,000. Because drivers did the math the planners hadn't. For most of them, that shortcut wasn't worth the price. They stayed on the long way around, the freeway, the slow way, and the great road across the bay sat half empty. A $10 billion shortcut that most people chose not to take. The bubble that wrote the forecast had burst years before the ribbon was cut, and the country that was supposed to pay those tolls no longer existed. It took more than a decade to face the obvious. In 2009, the toll was slashed to 800 yen for cars with an electronic pass, a fifth of the original price, with the government on the far shore quietly paying the difference out of public money year after year to get cars onto the road at all. It worked. Traffic finally climbed toward what the original forecast had promised. But read that number again. The road only hit its targets once somebody else agreed to cover part of every single crossing. And for the town the road was supposed to make rich, the arithmetic ran backwards. Kisarazu had been promised a boom. A 15-minute link to the capital side of the bay was supposed to pull money, jobs, and development across the water. Instead, the road worked like a straw, and the big city did the sucking. Shoppers who used to spend their money in Kisarazu could suddenly reach the malls across the bay in minutes, and the money drained away with them. Japanese planners even have a name for it: the straw effect. Land prices on the Chiba side sank. Storefronts went dark. The boomtown never came. And the strangest twist of all is Umihotaru itself. The rest stop in the middle of the bay became the destination. People drive out from both shores to eat dinner on an artificial island, look at the water, and then drive home the way they came. Some of the most reliable traffic on a $10 billion road is going nowhere at all. That's the thing about a build like this. The engineering was sound. Machines the size of buildings drove a tunnel under a living sea, and it held. 2 islands were raised out of open water, and they're still there. By every measure of steel and concrete, they won. It was the arithmetic that lost, the assumption that if you build the impossible, the world will line up to pay for it. And that's the part the postcard of the ocean firefly never mentions. You can beat a bay with enough money and enough nerve. Beating it is the easy part. Keeping the thing open year after year, against the salt and the quakes and a ledger that never balances. That is the bill that outlives everyone who signed off on it. The next machine we take apart smashes through frozen ocean for a living, with a nuclear reactor in its belly and a crew who know exactly what one bad weld would mean.